Welcome to Second Watch, your direct line to the second mass. I am Wil Wheaton, and I'm your host. We have just seen the latest episode of Falling Skies. Tonight we have star Noah Wyle, executive producer and writer Remi Aubuchon, and the producer and writer of this episode, Mark Verheiden, with us to size up the new world being created in the ruins of Charleston, South Carolina, and to talk about what its new leadership will look like. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Mark, it is quite a shock to find a city that appears to be in total ruins, but has actually built some semblance of society. But then on top of that, to learn that this society is about to hold elections seems almost ludicrous in the face of the unbelievable danger that exists just outside their borders. So where did that idea come from?
Well, I think like all the ideas on this show, it came from the writer's room and working together, trying to figure out what would be a fun change-up. The show in the first 8 episodes, obviously the second mass has been on the road and gone through hell. And so we thought it would be interesting to finally reach Charleston and discover it's sort of everything they always wanted. But then to discover that everything they always wanted has changed. And it seems like they have safety, they have food, they have water, they have everything that they've hoped for, but that they're not fighting back. And so that becomes an issue for the second mass. And so it was fun to try to just explore how the second mass sort of turns things around inside Charleston once we get there.
Well, I mean, the whole show is turned around now. This episode is so different in tone, in storytelling, visually, from everything we have ever seen, going all the way back to the pilot. How do you feel about that? Do you think like, oh, I'm taking a big risk, or is it like, yay, new toys to play with?
Number 2, new toys to play with. You know, it was really fun to move into. We shot the whole episode in an abandoned shopping mall in Vancouver. It was fun to take over the mall and sort of create our own space.
I'm really glad that you shot in an abandoned shopping mall, because if there is anything growing up in the 70s taught me, it's that when the apocalypse comes, we will live in malls. So I'm very glad to know that. Thank you for confirming what I have spent 40 years believing. Noah.
Yep.
Now that the second mass has reached the relative safety of Charleston, can Tom the dad kind of back off a little bit as far as sort of hovering over the kids and keeping them close and keeping them safe? Or is this more a case of same worries, new city?
Well, the roller coaster is sort of building up this expectation of what Charleston is going to be, and it becomes very character specific what that fantasy is. And I think for Tom, this notion of being part of the rebuilding of society, getting a chance to be at the table of the next founding fathers, writing the new Constitution, the new Declaration of Independence, I think is very exciting to the academic in him. But his experiences on the ship and the interaction with the aliens over the course of the season has definitely sort of hardened his opinion that there's no more negotiations to be had with these aliens, and hiding is no longer an option. And I think that he becomes quickly disillusioned with what has been created in Charleston, and thinks that it's really only a temporary solution. As much as we sort of psychotically need these trappings of our former existence, whether it's elections or showers or food or some semblance of society, until we've eradicated the threat, this is just a fantasy.
So does Tom see complacency in this new place? In this new civilization?
A touch of cowardice, a little short-sighted thinking, all those things.
Because it seems like if Tom had come upon this maybe 2 or 3 episodes into the show, he maybe would have thought, oh, thank God. But he has changed so much. Do you think he needs the fight more than he needs the civilization?
I think it's a means to an end. It's like, this is all great, but this is all premature. This is a great template that we're sort of putting together. And we should revisit this hopefully in 6 months when we no longer have to look through the skies when the bugs are gone. Exactly.
Remi, how did you go about designing that underworld of Charleston?
Well, the first thing we started with was what Charleston would look like, and hopefully we gave the audience enough of at least a shock at the end of 208 to think that they were expecting there to be a thriving city. That I think everybody's expectations in the second mass, and hopefully the audience, was, oh my God, they're going to come and there's buildings and everything's been cleaned up. And suddenly it's like what's happened is actually exactly that. It's just all happened underground. So we envisioned the idea that you take what is available to you. There was the metaphor, as Mark pointed out, that what has really happened is that the leaders of the new capital of the new United States of America has really decided to hide in a hole as deep as possible and to surround that. So there was that metaphor of that with the basement. But I thought that the idea of the fact that suddenly what would we do? We would go underground. We would start expanding, and we would take over the shopping malls because probably there was stuff there. And so it was fun to figure out what everything was, where everything was, and what everything was inside that. There's a lot in this episode that you don't see that we actually built and designed. There's schoolhouses, there's a whole military section and stuff, which we will reveal as we go on. Yes, we will see more and more of that in the future.
So it seems like history professor Manchester has gleefully found himself in a time, place, and situation where he can like play American Revolution dress up, right? So what do you see happen if he succeeds with his leadership plan to blow up the tunnel and seal it all off and just wait for everything to go away?
Mark?
Well, Mark, if he succeeded, they would be able to live underground for another few months. But the truth is it is a lie that the aliens are coming and they'd eventually be destroyed. So his plan, although on the surface feels like a very comfortable sort of way to go, is completely wrong. He is wildly misguided, partly not out of fault of his, but partly because he hasn't had people on the outside, like the Second Mass has been, experiencing the things that Tom and the Second Mass have gone through. So, I mean, I don't think, one thing we wanted to do, I think, with this episode is not say Manchester's a bad guy, particularly, or Bressler or any of those characters. They're trying to do the best they can with the information at hand, but they've come to some wrong conclusions. And the Second Mass are basically, and Tom, and are the ones who say, hey, this is what you need to change because it's not going to work.
Would you talk a little bit about the casting of Matt Frewer and Terry O'Quinn? Because that's awesome.
Well, I think that Terry O'Quinn is, I think all of us can say we've all been longtime fans of Terry, and certainly he fit the bill for the gravitas of Manchester. We wanted someone that Tom Mason could and did respect, almost idolized for much of his life. And the shock of, which was such a wonderful scene for me, when suddenly he realizes, oh my God, my mentor here is the person that's put this all together. No wonder it's so spectacular. But to watch the transition and the disillusionment that Tom goes through of his hero becoming not quite as cheery and shiny as he thought, we really needed an actor who was going to show us those colors. Likewise, with Matt Frewer, we wanted someone who wasn't just a general with his gun and doing everything military-like. We wanted someone who was thoughtful and frustrated at the same time. And the contrast between the two of them, I think, turned out to be really quite wonderful.
Never meet your heroes, especially during the alien apocalypse.
Yes, exactly right.
Noah.
This whole notion of Charleston would be a lot more seductive to the Second Mass if we didn't have this piece of information that there was a possible alliance to be made with this rebel faction in the alien group.
Really?
That for the first time, certainly for Tom, he sees a potential tactical advantage that should really be exploited. And that's really what the driving force behind his hesitancy to throw all in Charleston's about.
Noah, at times it seems like Tom and Weaver are beginning to really swap personalities, right? So Weaver is sort of softening, and Tom is just becoming increasingly confrontational.
Well, the way Will and I looked at the season was that, oddly enough, he would sort of look at Tom and Ann to be the parents of the Second Mass, but in a way I thought sort of look at Weaver and Tom as being the parents of the Second Mass, and they alternate roles of mother to father week to week depending on what the situation is. And then when we get to Charleston, he is reunited with his daughter. He has to rankle a little bit of having been in charge and now has to be a subordinate to these other people. But I think he has the possibility of retaining a sense of family again is very seductive to him, whereas Tom doesn't have any illusions that this is great, but we have a job to do.
Do you foresee future conflict between them? Because now it has just been, Weaver's just been like, let's go, let's keep moving. And now Tom is the guy who's saying we cannot sit in here. This is not the right place for us to be.
I think it's a healthy confrontation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the jeopardy that their previous confrontations did. It's much more of, we have to get on the same page with this. It's much more of a dialogue than it ever was before. And I see the characters actually moving closer together and really being able to work as a team and letting dramatically the threats and the obstacles come from other characters and other situations as opposed to it being internal between their relationship.
Yeah, because now that they've split the second mass up, it seems like that forced breaking of the group would really push them closer together, right?
Exactly.
So listen, this was a hell of a cliffhanger. So I am sure that the audience has questions about the show. So who would like to ask questions of the panel? Yes?
This question's for Noah. Do you feel like you've regained the trust of the second mass after your detainment, and has it had any lingering effects on your ability to lead the masses?
I think he's back in their good graces. I think that he feels at this point that he's no longer acting as homing pigeon, drawing the enemy to them. I think he feels pretty secure. Charleston it means everybody's up for grabs. The roles are all going to get erased. There's no more leadership. We all have to integrate in with this other system, and we all have to kind of find our footing again. So in a way, his confidence is sort of brought back to zero as he tries to navigate what role he could play in this new world. But I don't think he is any longer the object of mistrust from the people he was traveling with.
I would like to thank you for the pun, lead the masses. That was sensational. Who's next?
I guess this is for any of you. I have to ask the infamous question, the Spielberg influence. How much has he had? How is it involved? Is he hands-on? And how does that tie in with you all?
Well, Stephen is actually very active in our show, which is great. He's got a lot to do and a lot on his plate, so it's not as if he hangs around in the writer's room all day. But at the beginning of the season, we had several conversations, and they're very fun because they're very free form, and he just loves riffing, and he just goes off on these strange tangents that you're not. We had one conversation where we were discussing old 1950s science fiction movies, and one of that came up was The Tingler, and how he saw it as a boy, and he was scared out of his mind about it. And to be honest, that's where the Harness Factory came out of. It's like those kinds of interactions with Stephen are very fun. And then throughout the course of the season, he clearly read all the scripts, watched all of the cut episodes, and dailies, and often we would get emails from him requesting things or saying good, and then we had sort of every once in a while we'd have a phone call discussing some particular aspect of it. So we honestly have always been completely surprised about how much involvement he actually has in the show, and it's very welcome. I never feel he's very good about not making it feel intrusive or dictatorial. It's very much of a collaborative thing, which is fun to deal with.
There was a story that he was shooting his Abe Lincoln movie all day, and then he had a long 2-hour car ride back to the hotel at night, and he'd get in the car and immediately pop in all the dailies from Falling Skies and watch those every night, which as an actor is really gratifying to know that your work is being seen by the master storyteller himself daily.
Yeah, I would just be happy to know that Steven Spielberg knew I existed.
Yes.
Much less watching me work every day.
But he also weighs in very heavily in post-production with the digital effects too. He's very specific about the design of the aliens and the world and the spaceships.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's so easy to just sort of cynically think, someone like Steven Spielberg puts their name on a show. But that he's actually hands-on.
Quite the contrary.
Like
he pulls his name off of things that he's not proud of being involved in.
All right, we are out of time, so I want to thank you guys so much for dropping by tonight, and thank you for such a great episode tonight. Next week is the season 2 finale of Falling Skies, and you don't want to miss it. And Second Watch will be live next week with many of the actors and producers talking about the future of the Second Mass. We will be live at 10 p.m. Eastern right here at TNTdrama.com. So until next week, keep the resistance strong.